Welcome, beloved and anointed ones. The truth doesn't truly set you free until it completely shatters everything that was built on the lie. Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle into your spirit. Because today, we're not here to sprinkle positivity over pain or wrap wounds in pretty words. We're here to confront the raw, unfiltered spiritual truths, the kind most people run from, the kind chosen ones like you were forced to swallow without warning, without anesthesia. This is not a pep talk. This isn't about trusting the process when the process itself feels like warfare. This is the kind of truth that makes your spirit sit up straight, your ego sweat, and your soul finally exhale in relief. Because someone is finally naming what you've always known but could never quite say. Science confirms what you've felt your entire life. The brain reacts to truth the same way it reacts to physical pain. That's why people recoil when you speak clearly. That's why they avoided your presence. They couldn't handle the spiritual frequency you carry. Not because it was flawed, but because it was accurate. You didn't suddenly become too much. You just stopped playing small. You stopped pretending not to notice. You stopped accepting disrespect as normal. And when you did, they labeled your transformation a problem. You see, they don't hate you because you did something wrong. They hate you because you didn't collapse in the places where they would have folded. You kept standing when logic said you should have been on the floor. You rose when they were silently betting against your comeback. They hate the fact that their projections couldn't break you. They can't say it out loud, but your strength confronts them with everything they've avoided in themselves. You're not just thriving. You're doing it without them, without their permission, without their understanding. And that, to their ego, is the ultimate insult, because it means you were never dependent on their validation. You were simply waiting for the moment you remembered who you are. Here's what nobody says out loud. You're not just healing for yourself. You're healing for your bloodline. For the generations who were silenced, broken, oppressed, and afraid. For the children yet unborn who will never carry the weight you had to bear. That's why you always felt like the black sheep. That's why you were misunderstood, criticized, excluded. Because you were born to interrupt what others normalized. You weren't sent to continue dysfunction. You were sent to disrupt it. You questioned what everyone else tolerated. You exposed the lies wrapped in tradition. You said, "This stops with me." And for that, they treated you like the enemy. But you weren't the problem. You were the portal. You were the glitch in the system that generations prayed for. And while they don't clap for you now, the echoes of your courage will be felt for centuries. You are not just a survivor. You are the reset, the divine interruption, the sacred rebellion that turns family curses into future blessings. They weaponized your innocence because they mistook it for ignorance. But you weren't naive. You were pure. In a world drunk on manipulation, your purity was a threat. You gave people chances, space, grace. And when they showed their hand, you didn't fight dirty. You didn't scream or retaliate. You went quiet. You observed. And that silence, it terrified them. Because it wasn't passivity, it was power. You saw everything, the passive-aggressive digs, the gossip disguised as concern, the fake support. You clocked it all. And still, you stayed silent, not because you were weak, but because you were wise. Your silence wasn't indifference, it was calculation. You were weighing peace against reaction, wisdom against war. And when you finally walked away, it wasn't drama, it was closure. But to them, it felt like punishment. Because deep down, they knew they lost access to something real, something irreplaceable. You weren't just a person in their life, you were their final test. You were a divine checkpoint, an opportunity to evolve, to rise, to step into a higher version of themselves. But they failed, loudly, publicly, with pride. You offered presence, truth, compassion, and they treated it like a game. They thought they were outsmarting you. They confused your grace with gullibility. But what they didn't know is that you were the last chance. You were heaven's final warning. Not a punishment, not revenge, a gift. One last opportunity to shift. And they fumbled it. Now they sit in the ruins of their own cycles, repeating patterns, haunted by the one presence that could have changed everything. You. They played with sacred energy, and they lost access to the portal that was designed to liberate them. People didn't ghost you because you were the problem. They ghosted you because your energy was too revealing. Your presence mirrored what they didn't want to face. You didn't even have to say a word. Just being in your energy made them confront truths they'd buried under performance and pretense. That's why they vanished. It wasn't your intensity, it was your accuracy. Your light was too precise, too pure. And that kind of clarity is terrifying to people still hiding from their own reflection. Don't internalize their distance. It wasn't rejection, it was spiritual avoidance. You weren't too much. You were simply too real. You've been called too emotional, too intense, too deep, and every time it wasn't about you. It was about their inability to meet you in the deep. You were never designed for shallow waters. You were made to swim in the depths, to carry sacred truths that pierce illusions. You weren't overwhelming. You were overflowing. You weren't meant to be maintained. You were meant to be met. And those who couldn't match your depth mislabeled you. Not because you were wrong, but because you were rare. You didn't ask for worship. You asked for honesty. And most people weren't ready for that. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't have to prove anything. Your evolution exposed their lies. You didn't need revenge. Your growth did the talking. While they clung to old narratives, life rewrote your story with clarity. The same mouths that once mocked you now stay silent. Not because they still think they were right, but because now they know you were. And their shame doesn't come from your success. It comes from the realization that they lost access to someone who only had good intentions. You didn't have to clap back. You just had to keep growing. You're not hard to love. You simply require growth. You don't demand perfection. You demand presence. You don't need praise. You need purpose. You're not difficult. You're divine. And people who haven't done their inner work will always find that kind of love intimidating. They say they want real, but when it shows up and asks for truth, they run. You weren't sent to be consumed. You were sent to elevate. Your standards are not walls, they are filters. Filters that protect you from the empty and attract only the aligned. You were never meant to fit into someone else's fantasy. You were sent to break the illusion. They're not punishing you for who you are. They're punishing you for no longer playing the role they cast you in. The one who stayed silent. The one who overgave. The one who didn't know better. But you do know better now. And that's why they're triggered. You didn't betray them. You stopped betraying yourself. You weren't just another connection. You were a portal, a key, a sacred mirror. And they treated you like a game. They mocked what they didn't understand. And now they're stuck, chasing highs that don't last, connections that don't nourish, conversations that never reach soul level. Because what they mistook for just vibes was actually vision. What they thought was just energy was actually assignment. They mishandled the sacred, and now the door is closed, not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. They said you lost your mind, but you didn't. You just left their illusion. You stopped living in the limited reality they created and started walking in divine perception. Your mind wasn't breaking, it was expanding. Your soul wasn't unraveling, it was remembering. And now, they call what they don't understand madness. But it was never madness. It was awakening. You set boundaries, and they called you difficult. You said no more, and they called you cold. But your boundaries weren't cruelty. They were clarity. You stopped bleeding for people who were feeding on your confusion, and when they lost access to your energy, they called you selfish. But it wasn't selfishness. It was self-respect. Your healing drew the line, and their manipulation couldn't cross it. You never asked to be better. You were just brave enough to break first. You didn't seek the spotlight. You sought peace. And when life didn't give you comfort, it gave you fire. And you let that fire transform you. You let the pain teach you. You let the breaking become your rebirth. And now you shine. Not because you wanted to prove anyone wrong, but because you stopped pretending and let your truth speak louder than their opinions. You weren't sent to be loved first. You were sent to be misunderstood. That was part of your divine assignment. The path of the chosen one isn't paved with immediate validation or applause. It's marked by silence, by exile, by the aching loneliness of not being seen for who you truly are. From the moment you entered this world, your spirit carried a vibration that disrupted the norm. You were the question that others didn't want to answer, the mirror they weren't ready to look into, the energy that didn't ask for permission to be different. It just was. They couldn't categorize you because you were sent to create a new category. You weren't meant to be labeled. You were meant to liberate. You were the frequency they couldn't name. The presence they couldn't place, the truth they weren't ready for, the prophecy walking around in skin, misunderstood not because you were wrong, but because you were ahead. They didn't reject you because you lacked something. They rejected you because your soul carried too much truth for their timeline. Your light arrived before their eyes could adjust. Your depth was threatening in a world addicted to surface level survival, and so they labeled you strange, intense, too sensitive, too quiet, too honest. But none of that was a reflection of your weakness. It was a reflection of your assignment. You were sent as a disruption, a divine anomaly, a sacred interruption to everything broken systems called normal. And when they couldn't control you, they rejected you. When they couldn't decode you, they dismissed you. But hear this loud and clear: your rejection was not a detour. It was a setup. Every closed door, every turned back, every moment of being overlooked wasn't an accident. It was alignment. God didn't hide you because you weren't ready. God hid you because they weren't ready. You were being preserved, not punished. Protected, not passed over. Concealed, not condemned. While they built kingdoms of illusion, you were being fortified in the unseen. While they chased clout and applause, you were being carved in the wilderness, shaped by silence, anointed in private. And now as the cosmic tides shift and truth begins to rise from the ashes of falsehood, timelines are catching up. The world is starting to hunger for what you've always carried. The very traits they mocked are becoming the medicine they seek. The same voice they silenced is now the one they crave in their confusion. What once made you the black sheep will now make you the blueprint. What made you the outcast will now mark you as the oracle. You were never behind. You were just early. You were never lost. You were hidden for divine timing. And through it all, you're still here. Still standing. Still glowing. Still expanding. After the abandonment. After the betrayal. After the exile. After the silence that felt like a scream in slow motion. You're still rising, not because you were untouched by pain, but because you let that pain become purpose. You didn't just survive, you transformed. You didn't let the fire consume you. You became it. You didn't let the breaking shatter you. You let it shape you. And now, when they look at you, they don't see who they dismissed. They see the embodiment of everything they said wasn't possible. You were never sent to fit in. You were sent to filter out what wasn't aligned. You were sent to shift the atmosphere, to ignite remembrance, to awaken sleeping souls just by being you. And now the same ones who tried to bury you, silence you, shrink you, are starting to realize a truth too late to undo. They didn't bury you. They planted you. And this bloom, this divine resurrection, it was never meant to be quiet. Your glow is not just survival, it's strategy, it's destiny, it's divine evidence that what God ordains, no man can cancel. You were never forgotten. You were rooted, so that when the storm came, you wouldn't be shaken. You were hidden to gain strength beneath the surface, so that when the moment came to rise, you wouldn't just emerge, you would ascend. If this message lit a fire in your spirit, don't keep it locked inside. Let your soul speak. Like it, share it, echo it out into the universe. Let the world know you weren't broken, you were becoming. You weren't crazy, you were called. You weren't too much, you were exactly right. Subscribe to this space if you're done pretending and ready to live in sacred truth. This isn't just a message, it's confirmation. It's a mirror. It's your moment to remember that you were never lost. You were chosen. And this is not the ending. This is the emergence. This is the unraveling of your becoming. This is just the beginning. God bless you. Stay rare, stay rooted, stay rising. And above all, stay undeniably you.